If you sit quietly for a moment and really listen to the way your own mind moves, you will notice something rather strange. Thoughts appear on their own. You do not summon them. You do not wind up some little mental machine and command it to begin. They arrive the way birds land on a tree, effortless, unannounced, free. Most people never quite notice this because they are busy trying to control the flow. They sit in the middle of the mind like a traffic officer who believes he is in charge of every passing car. But thoughts are more like clouds than cars. They drift in, drift out, dissolve, reform. They have a life of their own. And if you allow yourself to see this clearly, you begin to sense something liberating. You do not think thoughts. Thoughts think themselves. Of course, this idea can feel unsettling at first, because we have been trained to believe that the little voice in the head is the captain of the ship, the thinker, the controller, the author of our lives. But if you look a little deeper, you discover a curious twist. The thinker is made entirely of thoughts. The captain is just another pattern in the same storm. Now, this is not meant to suggest that you are powerless or passive. Not at all. You are simply part of a much wider happening, an event that includes your body, your breathing, your emotions, the room around you, the world outside, and the great, unfathomable universe beyond that. You are a wave in the ocean of existence, not a separate blob of water trying desperately to manage the tide. So when a thought pops up, notice how little you had to do with it. There you are, perhaps having tea, or staring absently out of the window, and suddenly the mind says something like, "What if I fail tomorrow?" Or, "Should I call that person back?" Or, "Why did I say that embarrassing thing 3 years ago?" It is automatic, spontaneous, sometimes inconvenient, but undeniably alive. When you see that thoughts think themselves, you stop holding them with such tension. You begin to relax into the flow. You realize you do not need to supervise each one. You do not need to treat your mind like a classroom full of unruly students. Because thoughts are not misbehaving children. They are natural expressions of consciousness, like ripples on a lake. This shift in perspective creates a kind of inner spaciousness, a widening around your experience. You begin to observe thoughts the way you would observe birds circling in the sky. They can be fast or slow, bright or dark, graceful or clumsy, but they do not require your interference. They do not owe you anything, and you do not owe them obedience. One of the problems we face is the habit of identifying with every thought that passes through our awareness. If a thought appears saying, "I am anxious," we immediately conclude that we are anxious. If a thought says, "I will fail," we assume it speaks truth. If a thought says, "I must act right now," or something terrible will happen, we panic and follow its orders. But these are simply movements of the mind. They are not commandments. They are not declarations of reality. They are suggestions offered by a process that is always running. To see this clearly is to experience a kind of liberation. It feels like suddenly stepping back from a rushing river. Instead of being swept away, you find yourself sitting on the bank watching the water flow by. You can notice patterns, shapes, colors, currents, all without being tossed around. And every so often you may decide to dip your hand into the water or wade in for a moment, but you no longer feel trapped inside it. Thoughts think themselves. They are a natural phenomenon, and you are the awareness in which they appear. You are the space that allows them to come and go. A thought is not the same as the sky that holds it. A cloud is not the same as the vastness it drifts through. Consider what happens when you try to silence your thoughts by force. You sit down, determine to quiet the mind, and immediately the mind becomes noisier. It is like trying to smooth a pool of water by slapping it. The harder you try, the worse it gets. This is because you are attempting to control something that does not operate by command. Thoughts arise spontaneously. They obey the same principle as breathing or digestion or the beating of your heart. They are expressions of life, not machines waiting for your instruction. Once you grasp this, you discover a new freedom. You no longer fight thoughts. You no longer resist them. You simply allow them to be. Some will be pleasant, some unpleasant, some inspiring, some strange, but all of them are part of the great dance of existence. And here is where the insight becomes beautiful. When you stop trying to manage the flow of thoughts, you open space for clarity. The mind, no longer harassed, begins to settle on its own. This does not mean thoughts disappear. They simply lose their grip. They move with more ease. Your awareness becomes less tangled in their stories. Over time, something else begins to dawn on you. Thoughts are not the enemy. They are not a burden to be carried. They are the mind's way of playing, exploring, reflecting, creating. They are like waves curling and uncurling on the shore. When you look at them without fear, you can even enjoy them. But enjoyment is different from identification. To enjoy thoughts is to watch them like you might watch fireflies at dusk. They flicker in and out of view. They sparkle for a moment, then vanish. You appreciate their dance without trying to catch them. This understanding also helps with those heavy, troubling thoughts that seem to come from nowhere. Instead of wrestling them, you observe them. Instead of believing them, you witness them. You notice how they arise, peak, and pass. Even the most stubborn thoughts behave this way. None stay forever. They cannot. They are temporary by nature. Most of our suffering comes from taking thoughts too seriously. We act as though the mind is an oracle that delivers absolute truth. But thoughts are often no more accurate than daydreams. They form from memory, expectation, habit, and imagination. They reflect patterns, not necessarily reality. When you realize that thoughts think themselves, you stop assuming they're all true. You start seeing them as possibilities rather than prescriptions. And with that shift, your relationship with your inner world becomes far more peaceful. If you try a simple experiment, you will see this very clearly. Sit quietly for just 1 minute. Close your eyes if you like. And instead of trying to silence the mind, simply watch. Notice where thoughts come from. Notice how they behave. Notice how they fade without your help. You are not the creator of these events. You are the witness. This brings us to a deeper insight. If you are not thinking thoughts, then what are you? You are the awareness in which all of this unfolds. You are the space that allows everything to happen. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, sights, sounds, all appear in the field of your consciousness. You are not the storm. You are the sky. You are not the noise. You are the silence that holds it. When you understand this, something softens inside you. The need to control fades. The tension in the chest loosens. You begin to trust yourself more, because you are no longer trying to be the master of the mind. You are simply participating in the great unfolding. And strangely enough, when you stop fighting your thoughts, your thinking actually becomes more clear. Insights arise naturally. Creativity flows more freely. Decisions feel less forced, because you are no longer pushing against the current. You are moving with it. This does not mean you should drift through life without direction. It means you allow thoughts to come and go without clinging. You choose how to act from a place of clarity rather than panic. And the irony is this: once you stop insisting that you are the thinker, you discover a far deeper intelligence at work. Life moves through you with ease. Solutions appear where struggle once lived. You realize you have always been part of something far larger than the tiny narrator in your head. You do not think thoughts. Thoughts think themselves. And you, dear listener, are the open space in which they dance. Before we go deeper, notice something. Right now, as you listen, the mind is already generating thoughts about what comes next. That small anticipation is a doorway. It keeps you leaning in. And this entire idea becomes even more intriguing when you realize that the anticipation itself is another spontaneous thought. So let us use that momentum to deepen this reflection further. Consider how this understanding reshapes the way you move through the world. When you are no longer tangled in every passing idea, you begin to notice subtler movements within yourself. You notice the quiet pulse of intuition, the gentle hum of awareness. Beneath thought, the feeling of simply being alive without any demand to interpret or judge the moment. This is not the absence of thought, but the presence of a wider perspective. There is a kind of intelligence that emerges when you stop clutching at every mental event. It is the intelligence of stillness, the intelligence that watches the play without getting lost in the script. And curiously, this intelligence tends to guide you more wisely than the frantic chatter ever could. When you give thoughts the freedom to rise and fall, they become clearer, more honest, less distorted by tension. You begin to respond to life rather than react to it. Imagine walking through a forest. If you are constantly wrapped in thought, you miss the texture of bark, the scent of pine, the soft shift of light through leaves. But when you give thoughts room to breathe, the world becomes more vivid. You realize that your attention is not meant to be trapped inside the head. It is meant to move freely, to wander, to take in the richness of experience. Thoughts can accompany you, but they do not need to dominate the journey. This shift also affects how you relate to others. When you recognize that thoughts think themselves, you become more patient with the storms that appear in other people's minds. You understand that they too are visited by sudden worries, old memories, conditioned fears. You no longer feel the need to judge or fix them. Instead, you meet them with understanding. You see the human condition as a shared experience, not a private struggle. And gradually, a kind of compassion blossoms. You begin to sense that beneath all thoughts, beneath all stories, beneath all the swirling patterns of the mind, there is something unshakably simple, a presence, a warmth, a kind of silent friendliness at the core of being. When you rest in that space, even for a moment, the entire tone of your life changes. Before we close this journey, let me give you one more angle that grips the mind a little tighter. Notice how every time you suddenly realize you were lost in thought, there is a fleeting flash of awareness, a spark. That spark is not a thought. It arrives before thought resumes. If you watch closely, that moment feels spacious, almost luminous. It is the mind catching itself in the act. These moments are powerful hooks inside your own consciousness. They reveal that awareness is always one step ahead of the story the mind tells. And once you see this, even briefly, the entire game changes. You begin to recognize the watcher more often. You begin to return to that spaciousness with a sense of curiosity. And the more often you return, the more naturally the mind settles. So let this idea sink in gently. You do not think thoughts. Thoughts think themselves. They rise like mist on a morning field and vanish with the same quiet grace. You are the field, not the mist. You are the open space in which every moment unfolds. And when you live from this understanding, life feels less like a battle and more like a dance.